Hello, my name is Greg Pryor, and I actually look after talent management for Workday internally and my colleagues, 5,000 colleagues at Workday around the world. I often get questions about things that not only we're doing here at Workday, but some of the major and exciting trends. And so today, it's my privilege to be joined by Dr. David Rock. David is a longtime friend and an amazing expert in the area of neuro leadership and specifically the application of neuroscience in talent management. Today, I've asked him if he could take two topics that I just hear a lot from our colleagues and our customers and our prospects and generally colleagues in the industry around the transformation of performance and some of the things that are happening in the area of performance management as well as in the area of leadership. David is the director of the Neuro Leadership Institute and has written an amazing book, if you haven't already read it, called Your Brain at Work. And now for many years has actually helped organizations and individuals, and I would include myself in that group, really understand how your brain and specifically the neuroscience of performance and organization helps people be successful. And so specifically, David coined the term neuroleadership, bringing together neuroscientists and leadership experts to build a new science to better develop leaders and managers and help organizational perspective. And it's been my privilege to work with David for many years and have found his research to be incredibly practical, not only in my role at Workday, but in previous roles, and I know many colleagues in across industry who have found him to be an expert and someone who has just some really fascinating things to share with others more broadly. And so with that, I'll turn it over to David to talk a little bit about the work that he's been doing, and then specifically to dive into the transformation of performance and some changes that are happening in the space of leadership development. Over to you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Greg. Good to be here with you, and thanks for the opportunity to share some of our research and thinking with the Workday partners and audience here. I wanted to dig into two big topics. The first one is the transformation that's happening in performance management. The second one is a big trend we're seeing around leadership development. I'll just give you the 30,000-foot view on our organization first up, and then we'll dig into those two topics. And Greg, I definitely invite your comments and thoughts and insights as we go through, so we have a bit of a conversation as well. So just to give you the high level on the institute, the Neuro Leadership Institute that I head up. Firstly, for those of you who don't know me, I'm originally Australian, based full-time in New York City, and our organization is New York, London, Singapore, Sydney, although we work very globally. We're building a new language for leadership. Everything begins with how the brain functions, and we have our own research arm, a team of neuroscientists on staff, and a big team externally, delivering about a dozen research projects a year across things like how to have better conversations, how to mitigate bias, how to set goals better. All these things based on what actually happens in the brain when we undertake these different activities. So we study the actual biology of leadership tasks, leadership activities, and then we educate individual contributors with some skills and theory programs, and we also provide solutions for organizations in three main areas. So our work with organizations is three practices. There's a performance practice we'll talk about today, transforming the quality of conversations. We have a D&I practice. We won't dig into that today. You can find more online. And we have a learning practice we will dig into, specifically the work on transforming leadership development. So we're digging into two of our three practices. And just at a high level, the three things we do a lot of research briefing. So we're not a membership organization in the classic sense. What we do is people who want to understand the research, we come in and share what the science actually says about, for example, performance management. Or we help them build a strategy otherwise with a thinking partnership. Or we help them execute a strategy with scalable learning solutions otherwise. And I know we've been partnering with Workday in a number of these ways and many other organizations out there as well. So that's enough of that. Let's dig into performance management and what's happening. And there's a big question that I often start with that's central and with performance management transformation. And it's really, where are you at with the rating question. Have you removed ratings? Are you thinking about it? Are you on the fence? Are you not on your watch? I think it's really helpful to identify, where you are and how you're thinking about this. Because I definitely have an agenda, which is that ratings themselves seem to be holding back a tremendous amount of value that could be generated from performance management. And the rating system we have is actually inhibiting agility, it's inhibiting setting stretch goals, it's inhibiting the quality and quantity of conversations people have. There's quite a lot of research now that we've been certainly pushing, but from other people as well, showing that companies are better off, particularly if they are in a war for talent. Companies are better off without a fixed rating. There's definitely some research showing that there's a trend for companies to remove ratings, and it's not just at the periphery, it's not just small companies. It's a very real trend, and we're currently up to about 55 large organizations who've done this. You can see some here. So about 55 large organizations have removed ratings completely from their system. So no, 3 or 4 or 5 fixed ratings. They're still doing pay for performance. They're still differentiating pay. They're still really differentiating performance in many creative ways. And they're not simplifying things into one fixed rating over time. And many of these organizations are Workday clients, and certainly the Workday solution works very, very well in a ratingless environment simply by switching off or not switching on one of the capabilities and still using all the other fantastic capabilities. So we've seen many of these firms either were or now are Workday customers as well. So why is this important? How does this work? I want to kick off with a study that I think tells the story so well. It's such an important study. It's a study of engagement across Eli Lilly. And you can see on screen here, you can see the bottom number there is a 2, the middle number there is 3 and 4, and then there's a 5 at the top. So you can see the number 2, these people are dropping. Here's what it is. This is straight after rating season. So straight after rating season, there is an assessment done and then done regularly from there on. And the assessment looks at engagement. It's based on Lilly's own engagement score. It was an 8-point engagement survey. What they found is that if you were the second bottom level, not the bottom level they were trying to get out. If you're the second bottom level in the company, you drop in engagement 85% and you stay dropped. For about 18 months, by the way. Now that's to be expected, I guess. But they didn't want to get rid of these people, and they didn't want them disengaged. They wanted them motivated. These systems are supposed to motivate people. So you've got the people who they're trying to improve actually less engaged directly after pay season and rating season. And here's the bigger problem. In the middle, you've got the ratings 3 and 4 is the bulk of people. The middle of the business, they drop in engagement, also 85%, although they come back up to about where they were 6 months later. Here's the big surprise. If the middle is a big problem, the big surprise is the top people. So rating 5 is the top people. Guess what? They actually are not excited by getting the top rating. On average, it's a 15% drop in engagement. Now, this goes against everything everyone believes. People think that top people like this rating, and if you ask them, they'll say so. People think that, if you took away ratings, the people, at the top will be really upset. It turns out that when you actually look at what these top people do, they manage people, and they hate having these conversations that really are intrinsically unfair, and they end up being much happier without them. And we've seen this from numerous case studies. So it's kind of really surprising how this works, but also makes a tremendous amount of sense once you dig into what really goes on. So at the end of the day, there's a cost to having ratings that ends up being larger than the benefit. Clearly, there's benefits. We wouldn't have been doing it. There's clearly benefits in terms of a sense of certainty and clarity, your numbers. Although we believe it's a very false sense of certainty, and the numbers don't accurately define your talent. There's clearly some benefits, though, overall to having a number system. We wouldn't have done it. It turns out that the costs to it, we believe, are significantly greater. And I'm going to dig into the research in a minute to explain why. But Greg, did you want to make any comments or add anything there before we get into some of the science as to kind of why ratings are troubling and how to do them differently? Anything that you'd like to add there?
Yeah, no, David, thank you. And I've got now more than, probably 6 or 7 years of experience having worked with you and worked with other organizations. And I think that the way you framed it there has made sense with the people I've worked with. And, we had this notion of ratings for so long, but I don't think we were ever as intentional as we needed to be in really saying, what is the cost benefit, and how do we really think about it in the context of, what we're trying to accomplish. I would also underscore what you suggested, which is not particularly that there is a right or a wrong answer, but in the context of whether you're in a war for talent, some of the different organizations that you're part of, I think my experience has been allowing people to step back, look at the research on this, and then be very intentional about their talent strategy, not just taking the default that we may have known for many years, but to your point, being really intentional. I couldn't agree more, and I've got many years of experience now in seeing what you've talked about really resonate with senior executives, resonate with employees, and help organizations be more successful.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Greg. Well, let's dig into the science a little bit of why ratings don't work and also how to do them differently. And I want to introduce a couple of areas of research that kind of bring this alive. Let me just do a different slide. Hang on. Here we go. 3 areas of research. The first is, if we want to improve performance, we want to foster a growth mindset. I'll explain what that is. We want to foster a growth mindset so people actually are trying to improve rather than just prove themselves all the time. Secondly, if we want people to have candid and honest conversations, we need to minimize the threat response involved. And thirdly, if we want people to positively embrace change, we need to facilitate insights, like really help people see things differently. So these 3 areas of research are helpful for understanding why we need to remove ratings, but also how to then have conversations. And I do want to just make a little bit of a kind of qualifier here. Companies that have removed ratings still kind of have a 2-rating track. They still have a framework for people who are seriously underperforming. And it looks like classic performance management. It might be 3%, it might be 4%, it might be as high as 5%. We haven't seen much higher than that. But this is a framework for the 95+% of people that you're trying to grow and develop. And if you're talking about just, how do you deal with really poor performers, which again is maybe 1 in every 20 conversations, you're going to want a different framework. And in the past, what's happened is we've been designing all the systems around the structure of, that 1 in 20. And this kind of turns that around. So let's look at each one of these. Firstly, if you want continual improvement, you want to foster a growth mindset. So what's a growth mindset? What's a fixed mindset? So a fixed mindset is the belief that you might have that you have skills you just can't get better at. The fixed mindset is like you think that it doesn't matter how hard you work at something, you won't get any better. Feedback won't be helpful. It's going to be dangerous. Stretch goals are bad, and other people's success will actually demotivate you. Let me explain this a bit more. You might believe that you're great at coding. You're great at Microsoft Excel. You're great at spreadsheets. You're great at logic, for example. You've just decided that you're not very good at selling, perhaps. And you've got a fixed mindset at sales, right? You've decided that it's just not something you've ever been good at. Maybe unconsciously you've decided it's not a part of you. Maybe your parents weren't good at it. It's just not kind of who you are. And as a result of having a fixed mindset around, say, selling, all these results happen. You just don't put in as much effort. You don't get feedback, and when you do get it, it's really uncomfortable. And it just starts with this belief that you might be fixed, that it might not be something that you're naturally good at. Compare that to a mindset called growth mindset, where you just think that you can get better. You're focusing on getting better. You think you can change. You know you need to put in effort. Feedback's going to be helpful. Stretch goals are good in this case, and other people's success actually inspires you. Other people's success really grows you in this case. And it's really a difference between, essentially, are you trying to prove yourself, or are you trying to improve yourself? Or are you trying to look good in the case of a fixed mindset, or are you trying to get better all the time in the case of a growth mindset? And what we find is that standard performance management systems nudge people, obviously, towards proving and trying to look good. Whereas removing ratings and focusing on quality conversations nudges people to improving constantly. And what we found is a significant increase in the number of conversations from about 1 to about an average of 4 when people have removed ratings, as well as a significant improvement in the qualitative nature. So the the conversations are much more about development and about the future and about growth, rather than about people trying to defend their work. So it's an important point. Greg, any comments you want to make on fixed and growth mindset? Any color commentary you'd like to add there to this first idea?
Yeah, no, thanks. And actually, we're actually big fans of this here at Workday, and we actually share this with our managers. And this idea of growth mindset really resonates. And to your point, it might be specifically related to a topic, but really helping. We teach our managers and help our managers, and they're naturally very good at this in really embracing a growth mindset and supporting their folks. For me personally, your comment here on prove yourself versus improve yourself really resonates. And I think that paradigm shift to really say, what's our objective? Is our objective to, have a system that's built for some fraction number of employees who we should be treating in one particular way? Or should we be uplifting and helping our people be successful and helping everyone have, rich and thoughtful conversations that improve yourself? And I know we practiced that here at Workday for many years. Other places I've worked have made that shift, but particularly for me, I would underline, those two ideas. And does your system help improve others, help others be successful? I think is, so much of what I've learned from you over the past number of years.
Great, thanks, Greg. So that's the first idea we think is really central to help us understand how to reinvent performance management. And it's a philosophical perspective. It's also a specific way of designing conversations. Like, for example, we've been helping companies build conversation guides for particular types of conversations. And, if you're giving someone positive feedback, you don't just want to say, good job, you're really talented at this. You want to say, good job, you've been really improving, and talking about the ways they've been improving. And this encourages people and nudges people towards actually growing. So you can use these principles to design all sorts of different types of conversations, which is super helpful. So that's the first principle. The second principle is minimize the threat response so that people can have, so everyone can have more honest and robust and candid real conversations. So here's the SCARF model. The SCARF model is something I launched in 2008, and we've trademarked it since then, but it's being used in a number of ways right across many organizations now to improve conversations. And SCARF is essentially a description of what motivates human behavior. It's the 5 domains of motivation, either negative or positive. You think of this as like the 5 primary colors of something we've always thought just kind of one way. We've always thought of motivation as just, carrot or stick, carrot being reward, stick being threat. Actually, they come in 5 colors, and these are the things that the brain really obsesses about. And status is literally your perception of yourself compared to others, where you are. Certainty is your ability to predict, to understand what's going on. Autonomy is a sense of control. Relatedness is having shared goals, working with people with things in common. And fairness is feeling that you're treated fairly and treating others fairly. So all 5 of these are playing out all the time. And in a rating system, while from the outside it might look like people are reacting just logically, what happens actually is you have to end up rating around half the company in the middle. And many companies, if not most companies, try to hire people who've had A's and B's. But I don't know of a company that goes to universities and says, give me your C candidates. Give me everyone who's been getting a C. I want to hire them. And so what happens with status is you have to give about half the company that mid-level rating. And it doesn't matter how much you explain that it's still a good rating. People equate it mentally to a C. And their status is attacked as a result. And we've seen a direct correlation between that and reduced engagement. So status is this feeling of how you're doing compared to others, also how you're doing compared to how you expect you should be doing, compared to yourself in the past and many other things. But essentially these rating systems hit status. They also hit certainty because the systems are very opaque. Although there's not a huge issue there, and you could say that certainty goes down a little bit when you take away ratings. Autonomy is a significant issue. Autonomy is a sense of control. And when you've got a fixed percentage of people that are allowed to be at different levels, you've got an autonomy problem. People feel like they have no control. You also have a relatedness problem with ratings because you're competing with others for limited ratings, limited bonuses, but also competing with your boss, where you're trying to prove that you're a high number and they're trying to reduce your number. And they're intrinsically unfair when you have a limited number of ratings at each level. So you're impacting all 5 domains of SCARF. And then if you remove ratings, you're still impacting, you're having a performance conversation. You're still impacting status and potentially fairness and other things, but much less. And there's a greater sense of autonomy, less unfairness, and the conversations are more aligned to the same kind of objectives. So that's the SCAR framework. Greg, anything you want to add to that? I know that you introduced this at Juniper Network before. I know we're starting to introduce this at Workday. Anything that you'd like to share in terms of how people use this and what happens when the language starts to get used in particular?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, there's two particular areas that I've used this in my experience, and it has been incredibly powerful, especially, my history has been working mostly with engineers, people who have more of a science basis, and they totally appreciate and get this context. And so the two spaces particularly is using SCARF to actually design the performance enablement systems I've built in the past and been involved in. I use these principles starting with the employee first to say, am I doing things that actually can move people in a toward state that allow them to operate from their prefrontal cortex that, and what I personally realized was that, previous systems were actually physiologically doing a brain drain. I work in high innovative, folks where you need people to be creative, high innovation organizations like a Workday. And when you have systems that literally, drain people's energy away from the prefrontal cortex where they have insights, where they do their best work, we were just doing a disservice to the organization. So building systems that actually have the SCARF principles, use the SCARF principles, are really built for the way, that people work. I would say the second thing that I've found really be very helpful is to actually teach this, simple but incredibly powerful framework to managers. I often get the reaction from folks saying that they call it a sort of stupiphany. It is so incredibly obvious, and yet this incredible epiphany at the same time. They say, this is the way I operate as a person. Now I understand what I'm doing to others when I've used some of the traditional systems. So for me, helping organizations, not run away from particularly ratings or not run away from some of the things that they've done in the past, but run toward a design that works the way the brain works has been incredibly powerful for me. And again, the two applications, using SCARF as a model, and then actually teaching it to managers and employees who have found it really resonates.
Great, thanks, Greg. That's great. So I'm not going to dig so much into that third piece, the insight work, but let's just say that you want to design conversations to maximize the chance of people actually having insights. So you're trying to get people to reflect on the way forward, how to improve their performance, versus just dig into problems in their performance or issues. You're trying to design conversations that help people find breakthroughs and remove roadblocks and really find ways forward. So those three areas of research are central to the work we found, and they help understand how to do things differently at a number of levels of scale. And I'll just put them back up on the screen there for a moment. Foster a growth mindset for continual improvement, minimize threat to have candid, honest conversations, and facilitate insight for people to positively embrace change. What we want to do is design structures that, at the level of conversations people are having, really drive actual improvement. So let's talk a little bit about this change that's happening. I want to give you a little bit of a sense of the shape of this whole transformation that's happening. Companies are crossing what we call the line of courage. Let me show you that, and then we'll come back to the slide. Companies are crossing what we call the line of courage, which is from performance scores to no performance scores, from forced ranking or ratings to more just general structured or guided conversations. And we believe it's not a fad. We believe it's a significant trend. There are between 52 and 75 large companies that have radically altered their PM strategy now. There are between 50 to 70% of firms considering major changes as well. I want to share just a couple of the data points on this trend, just kind of show you some of the things that are happening. We've just completed a study. We presented at our summit in November. We studied 52 large companies who've made the change, and then deeply studied 30 who we could get access to all their data and research. So what we found is that about 77 are public, 23% privately held. About 50% of them were under 10,000 employees, 31% 10,000 to 100,000, and 19% over 100,000. So fairly even spread. Wasn't just all small companies at all. About half, under 10,000, half above. Technology is definitely leading. Business services second, consumer goods next. What we found is, and we think the variable is, the companies that are in a war for talent have the greatest need for increasing engagement and increasing just employee sense of respect. And I think in companies in a war for talent, like technology companies, in particular, where there's limited people to do a lot of work, we think that's one of the variables that's really key. We've seen actually, I'll skip that one. We've seen a number of trends starting to happen around this, but one of the challenges is there's no point kind of accepting the data and accepting that a 1 to 5 rating is working. There's so much work to do in trying to get that number right that many companies are just saying it's not worth the effort. Think of these 5 points that you've got to do to try and identify a specific number. You've got to review a year's worth of employee effort, behavior, accomplishments. You've got to appropriately consider other factors that should or shouldn't be involved. Boil it down to one number. Factor how the person's accomplishment compare to others. Rate them using the same process as others. There's just so much to go into it that it's proving just not worth having the numbers. The numbers just aren't all that accurate. And there's a study way back, actually in 2000, that showed this. That showed that literally less than a quarter, in fact 21% of people's performance rating ties to their actual performance. The rest is largely manager bias. So it's such a big statement, but it's such an important finding that for all this work we do, we're actually creating a lot more noise than you might possibly imagine. And so there's a journey that companies have been going on. We've been helping some of those firms over 3 to 6 months. They've been going on a journey to transform away from ratings. It's taking about 6 to 12 months to design the new plan. Usually there's a first phase to identify what the business case is, what they want to achieve, kind of mindset they want, the branding they want. A really critical phase is defining what they mean by quality conversation. So helping companies identify what good looks like in a conversation. And then finally working out the evaluation plan, ideally based on their objectives of the system. And so it's about a 6 to 12 month journey to remove ratings. And what we've seen is that of all the companies we've studied so far, we haven't seen anyone going backwards. Here's a summary, and then Greg, we'll see if you have any more comments before we change gears. But a summary, we're definitely recommending keep doing pay for performance. Simplify it. Simplify it where you can, but keep doing it and keep differentiating. Empower, train, encourage managers to differentiate. Differentiating for performance is important. Focus even more on goal setting. Goal setting matters a lot. Separate the comp from the development conversations. Have it at a different time. Rebrand the overall process. We've seen some exciting new brands coming out. I've been involved in some of that. Track the conversations happening. You still need your Workday systems. You still need your systems to track the conversations, to track the other HR data, to know how people are doing. That's important. You just might not, switch on the rating system. Have more talent reviews, and again, store that data. Store how people are doing. You need to increase the talent reviews and the wider conversations, especially if it's multiple people, to reduce bias. You want to increase the conversations people have around talent. And finally, do manage the true lowest level of performance differently. And I mentioned that earlier. If someone is a true low, bottom end performer and someone that isn't a fit for whatever reason, we do encourage managing those people out of the business and, not just keep trying to improve them. That is an important factor to do. So, Greg, any closing comments here on performance before we change gears and talk about leadership development and transformation?
Yeah, no, David, I would just again highlight some of the things you said as well. I think while the ratings component is getting the headlines, and that's, an interesting and important, and you've talked about it in the research here, I think for me, people digging down and being more intentional, not just following the blueprints that maybe some of the big organizations did in the mid-'80s and saying, well, this is the way it should be. but taking the components that you've talked about and being incredibly intentional about designing processes that work for your context, that work for, that work with the individual brain. I think the other two big things, and you talked about this, that I would say, when you look at a business context, when you look at, my former organization, Accenture, and other companies who have moved away, they said the business context doesn't allow you to do this on a yearly basis. You need to be giving feedback all the time. And I believe we'll not only see more of that in a business context, but when we look at the needs of our millennials and the context by which they grew up in, we have a large number of millennials here at Workday. I spent a lot of time with them, an incredibly smart, incredible group of talented folks. And they grew up in a context where they expect feedback, they require it, and we know from from the amazing brain science work that we have this insatiable need to know where we stand. And I think we'll see that more and more with millennials. So, as we see some of these shifts, as we look at the brain science on this, I would encourage, and I always encourage my colleagues to take a step back and look at the science and be very intentional about how you think about building your performance enablement processes moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Great. So let's change gears. There's a lot of research and there's a big trend out there to brief PM. There's another big trend out there that I want to focus on, and it's around rethinking your whole leadership development strategy. And there's a number of reasons that this is happening. So there's a big movement, and we don't know the exact data yet. We're still studying this, but more than 50% of companies are rethinking their whole strategy around leadership development overall. And there's 6 reasons, up on screen here, but there's many others. Certainly, it's been little change for a long time. It's currently one of the most efficient processes that exists. It might be a year or two from needing to be better at a skill to actually getting better at it. There's a lot of digital disruptions coming in that are making people change how they think. There's a big pressure on skills. Leaders have a lot less time, both to evolve their skills as well as just to spend on learning. So there's pressure on leaders to learn more in less time. We know that leadership development is becoming less effective, which is quite surprising. And there's also been minimal spend in this space for quite a few years. So there's a number of factors that are driving towards a rethink in leadership development overall. And let's talk about what we're seeing in the market out there. We're seeing companies want to completely rethink how they define leadership, how they develop leadership skills, and how they support behavior change. So what does that mean? A complete rethink around just a definition of leadership, a complete rethink around literally how they're going to train and develop everyone. So companies are exploring all sorts of very creative solutions here. And the embedding is the hard one that I think no one is cracking, and people find so difficult. And we're going to dig into all 3 of these a little bit as well, and hear from Greg too. So some common goals for companies is simplify. The companies are trying to have a leadership development strategy that is much simpler, that's much more immediate, is coherent, where everything fits together, and with a bit more of an evidence basis as well. Companies are trying to do things that have more science and research under them. So let me begin, as we dig into this, let me begin with a little bit of theory, a little bit of the science of leadership development. And I have to dig into the science of learning overall. So what you're seeing on screen here is a framework called the AGES model. It stands for Attention, Generation, Emotion, and Spacing. And AGES is the 4 conditions that the brain needs for information to stick. So whether you're doing leadership development or teaching people Microsoft Office, you need people to be able to recall ideas. Now, recall doesn't mean a habit's formed, but if you have no recall, there's absolutely no chance of behavior change. So it's a critical foundation, and it's a very easy thing to study, much easier thing to study, recall, than habit formation. And so that's the foundation we've been using. So attention, generation, emotion, spacing. With this framework, you need all of these to be very, very high when you're learning something, for something to stick, for an idea to stick. So whether you're learning Microsoft Office or how to run a team, you need to be paying very close attention while you're learning. You need to be generating connections, which means putting in effort, linking to things that you know. You need to be having some strong emotions. You need to actually be experiencing something. You need to be feeling things. And finally, you need spacing. So this literally means you need to space out the learning and be coming back to things, ideally after a night's sleep as well. So attention, generation, emotion, spacing. These four conditions are critical. And what we're seeing is in the design is that we don't tend to think about this stuff in the design. In fact, the Corporate Executive Board did some research and found that only 13% of companies think about the way we learn. They literally think about the science of learning when designing learning solutions. They just kind of throw stuff together. So AGES is a critical foundation, and we build on that further. We found there are two tactical things that you can do that significantly increase AGES. And one of those is what we call insight learning. And insight learning is about the facilitation of learning activities to maximize the chance of insight versus just trying to deliver information. And insight is where things come together for you. So now this is a recorded event. It's tricky to do that in a recorded situation. You want live interactions with people. You want people to be able to pause and reflect. You want people to be able to hear other people's insights. You want to be able to get people lifting their thinking up to a much higher level. A number of things you can do to generate insight. But we know that insight learning significantly increases AGES. When you have an insight, you have high AGES. It's one of the highest forms of AGES. The second type of learning is called social learning. And we know that learning in a social interaction, so learning and discussing your learning with someone or interacting about your learning, significantly also increases AGES. You're paying attention when you're talking, you're making connections when you're talking, you experience stronger emotions, and you come back to the ideas more and more and more. So insight learning and social learning create high, really, really high AGES. And these are a couple of the principles that form the basis of our theoretical foundations for rethinking leadership. And we want to start with, and it's such an important thing, we want to start with, how do we really learn? So you see the gray bar at the bottom here, the science of learning. We think that overall there are 5 ideas that are really critical for rethinking leadership development. Whether you're defining it, you're building, or you're embedding, those 3 phases there. So phase 1 is defining, phase 2 is building, phase 3 is embedding. I'll dig into these a bit more, but whichever level you're at, you want to be able to start with coherence, which is everything fitting together, and then think about layering, which is what comes first. What do you kind of embed and digest first? And then think about how do you design for maximum AGES, and then how do you turn those into insight experiences and social learning experiences. So those are the 5 components of the science of learning from a neuroscience perspective, and this will give you a kind of a high level on that. So with that in mind, what happens when we're in each of these phases? Let's dig into these. Let's dig into these one at a time. Starting off with redefining leadership itself. So the objective here is to build a simple, memorable statement of leadership expectations, or leadership attributes, or leadership values, leadership culture, this kind of thing. The objective here is to have something that is relevant and it's sticky with strong coherence. And coherence means everything fits together. And it creates the DNA of everything that comes together. So let me give you an example of what I mean. We work with a technology company, a large one. If you walk around the business and ask people, what's expected of you as a leader, practically everyone will say, grow the business, lead our people, execute with urgency. They know exactly what's expected of them. We've been able to simplify the most important, most salient, and easiest to forget things that are expected of leaders. And it nudges people day by day by day to focus on the right things. Now compare that to, and I might go back a slide just to kind of tell the story. Compare that to what happens in most companies. Go and ask your manager, what are the expectations of leaders, or what are the leadership competencies or leadership frameworks, and you'll find very few organizations where managers can actually recall them. Now, if you don't know what's expected of you and you can't recall it without thinking, how are you using it? It's not really being used. It may be for assessment a bit. But such a critical foundation, if you want to drive behavior change in a new environment, that people actually need to recall ideas. So what we're doing is we're crystallizing the central issues for organizations. We're helping organizations say what really matters here, rather than trying to include everything. And then simplifying those things for easy recall, and ensuring biological validity, which is a more complex thing. But essentially what's happening is we're moving from too many leadership concepts to one clear set of expectations. From an assessment focus to a more development focus and priming, and from no common language to more of what we call a common operating system for leadership overall. And I think the real question here is, are you, like, what's more important? Is it a recall of a simple definition or including everything? And we believe in the science supports that if you can recall an idea, then you're going to pay it more attention. It's going to, you're going to be able to generate new connections to it. You're going to make emotional connections to it. It's going to come in mind over and over. So you've got ages, you've got high ages, if you can recall it. It's going to stick in your brain. But most importantly, you'll be able to use it in many, many situations. So recall is such a significant point. Greg, anything you want to add here, this first chunk, around redefining leadership? Any kind of commentary you want to add here from your experience of kind of this transition that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I would say again, and thank you for all the work you've done with us here at Workday, but, we use all of those theoretical foundations. We don't necessarily present them directly in the way we do our learning, but we've been very intentional in two new programs that we've shared with our colleagues internally to take each of those five ideas and to very intentionally use it to facilitate the learning. So whether it's a social around a peer-to-peer platform that we've created where people can share those ideas, we literally have an insight card that we use during our experiences. And David, probably not going to get through today, but David, you've done amazing work in thinking about a scale of insights. And as we share those with people, they immediately walk away with the notion for us that we're in the insight business rather than in the learning or the content business. And so these important foundations have really changed the way we think about designing our programs with the overall goal to facilitate insights, not to, share or download content. So happy to give more examples later, but I will say that the theoretical foundations is something that we design every learning experience, and specifically we refer to them as experiences now, to facilitate those insights, and we use those theoretical foundations as the fundamental approach to learning design, if you will, or insight.
Great, thanks, Greg. So this is one of these areas where the science is kind of so important for creating change, because when you talk about this with a team of senior leaders, they sort of nod and smile appreciatively and say, yep, I totally got that. And then when you actually get to work, what ends up happening is they try to throw everything in, and you end up with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 categories of things because they're all important. And the science of behavior change says that if you can't recall something, it's very unlikely to be useful, and super easy to understand how many things you can recall. It is a rule of 3. You get to 4, you get a big drop off. You get to 5, forget about it. If you want people to recall something easier, it is a rule of 3, although it's a 2-second rule. Each of those chunks can't be like 2 seconds long if it's 3. You can't have a long sentence. 3 long sentences, for example, won't work. So it's actually a timing issue. It comes down to how quickly you can say something to yourself quietly. If you can do it in under 3 seconds, it's much more likely to be recallable just because of the structure of working memory itself. So this is where the science can really help. And one of the really simple things that I've done is when we're designing one, I'll just get I'll get people to read out a version, and you can just see people stumbling even to read something that they should have recalled, and not being able to hold it in mind and be fluid with it, compared to reading out 3 bullets, for example, that are clear. They might have 3 to 6 words in each bullet. They're not just a word, but you can just hear the fluidity with which it's said. And if something's fluid, it'll be repeated over and over, and it's much more likely to stick. So this is one of the first central ideas. We need to create sticky leadership frameworks. Let's go on from there. The second area I want to talk about, phase 2, is about building the essential disciplines. And here, there's another challenge. Do we want to try to teach people everything, or do we want to focus on the fundamentals? And what we see again is too much content, too many things being thrown in, not enough focus on what really matters and making sure people get what really matters. And it's interesting, even if you simplify down to just 3 disciplines that you want people to focus on, something like, say, set great goals, right, as one discipline, just to get people to set great goals takes an enormous amount of work, and there's an enormous number of variables and insights and, everything in that world. But we tend to throw much too much into programs. So, this is something I challenge organizations with. Are you trying to teach people everything, or do you want to focus on the fundamentals? And, which one of these is really possible? And the third one here that, let me just go back to this slide for a moment. So just build essential disciplines. What you're trying to do is take a high-level set of objectives, maybe 3, maybe 4 bullets, and build this out at relevant levels. And the thing then is, how do you focus on behavior change? How do you design something that really changes behavior? And how do you do that in a way that really sticks? And we've been experimenting with this, and it turns out the science of spacing is super helpful. Breaking things out over time, you learn much, much more than learning in a chunk. It's so helpful to know that and to use that principle. It's great to mix up different learning styles. You might have some in-person, you might have some digital, you might have some self-paced, you might have a range of different activities. It's so helpful to mix up the different types of learning as well. But certainly we believe that cohort-based learning is powerful. That's how you get social learning. If people are learning with a group over time, you're much more likely to get social learning as well. So it's been experimenting with different social learning sizes. It's not like they have to be small groups. But I think social learning is a critical foundation. So building essential disciplines, the key question is, are you trying to do too much or not? And the final thing with just-in-time tools is everyone's trying to work out how to change behaviors kind of on the fly. And it is an important point. What's been happening here is people have been building manager portals of classes, and just about every company now has a learning management system where you can watch courses online. Trouble with that is, if you know you need a course and you're willing to sit down and do it, you probably are not the kind of person that really needs the course. People who tend to mostly need the course think they don't need it, and think that it's a waste of time. And so there's one point at which managers in particular are willing to learn something, and it's literally the 2 or 3 minutes before they're about to do something that they feel uncomfortable with. And so we think that you need not just-in-time classes, but just-in-time tools. Tools that people can use in literally a minute or two to inspire a different approach. And it's a different strategy. And so, we think there are 2 points at which you can drive behavior change. One is you can drive behavior change by kind of nailing people to the floor in a classroom and getting them to do exercises that can work. Even easier is you can design behavior change by giving people specific tools to use at specific times. Giving them, and those specific times are, when they're struggling. So giving people a tool they can literally open up on the way into a team meeting that has a lot of conflict. What am I going to do here? You've got a very receptive audience at that point. So just-in-time tools, our vision here is give managers what they need, when they need it, the way they need it. Clear, easy, fast access to how things are done at your company. And it's embedding the ideal skills in a way that everyone can access and champion. So that's that's the pathway. Now, getting from A to B across these 3 phases, an interesting journey. Maybe 3 months up to 6 months to define what you really mean by leadership now. Maybe 6 months to 12 months to build out how you now want to build those capabilities in people and be piloting and testing. And then it's an ongoing journey from there. But it's been exciting to step back and be involved in some of these projects. What's happened is this has been a forcing function for companies to have to work out just about everything to do with management. It's been a fantastic forcing function for getting managers to really think differently about learning overall. So, Greg, any questions that you wanted to ask or anything you wanted to add there? We've got a couple of minutes left. Any questions or comments before we kind of start to wrap up there?
Yeah, no, I think just maybe a question for you. I know we've had a chance to talk a lot about this. Is there an example or two that's really striking for you, work that you're doing with a customer that you've seen that moved from maybe a more traditional and classic approach to sort of a more brain-friendly way to think about that? one example that you really has inspired you recently?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with a number of projects. The one that's gone a little bit public, we're able to mention a little bit, is Intel, and we helped simplify a really complex web of leadership assets into a three-part framework, the one I mentioned before: grow the business, lead our people, execute with urgency. We're able to then articulate a set of 12 disciplines that lives underneath those three expectations. And these 12 disciplines are relevant to 4 different levels of manager. So we were able to say, look, as a first-time manager, that there are 3 fundamental disciplines you need to be good at, and then turn that into a 9-month experience with a learning at scale. And then a program above that, another 9-month experience for more senior managers, something above that for managers of managers, and something above that for really senior managers. And what we've seen is that there are particular disciplines relevant to different levels, but they're additive. So as you go through the organization and your management skills, you want the foundational ones, and then to be able to add to them. And we've been able to build these highly scalable solutions. For example, it's now December. Since July, Intel has put over 2,000 managers all around the world through some of these programs. And that's just kind of in startup phase as they get going. So their goal is to put around 15,000 managers all around the world through a really intense experience. And it's only a small part of it is in person. We've been able to follow the science of learning to do big chunks of it virtually and using other creative learning strategies. So that case study will be up on our website shortly, but it's been an exciting project. We're helping another technology company at the moment. They've gone through a big culture change. They're trying to really shift and nudge the culture. I can't mention who it is. But they, we were able to get the leadership to agree on a really clear, simple strategy for what really, really matters in their business now. And I think the question is, what really, really matters, rather than, what do we want everyone to do. The mindset, it takes a mindset shift, but it seems to be a really helpful shift when companies have it. That's the big idea there.
No, that's great. Well, thank you. Well, maybe I'll just offer a couple of final thoughts. First of all, a personal thought. So I have to tell you a story. Literally this weekend, my high school daughter was preparing for her exams, and she retreated to her room, spent about an hour in there doing, I'm sure, important things, and then I find her back in the kitchen about an hour later, and I would have thought she would have put in some more hours, and I asked her, I said, Kayla, why back in the kitchen here? And she said, well, I'm practicing the ages model. Spacing is very important to go through this. And she said, I've been very intentional. And David, this is an actual true story. So that'll teach me to actually share with my high school daughters the various good frameworks. But what I love about that is that, taking some of these very simple but incredibly practical ideas, being able to recall them and use them as frameworks by which we can operate. We can really improve our performance. And in this case, Kayla did say, she said, listen, every couple of days I revisit this topic, and I'm practicing. Believe it or not, she did actually use the ages model.
Fantastic. That's great.
Maybe share the 2 final thoughts, and then leave you for any final comments. I think, to your point, the other thing I have to really appreciate that has been so inspiring in the work that you're doing is, to your point, the digital ecosystem. And we've used some of your tools and technology and content in the work that we've been doing, but we've also built that into Workday itself. So we're using our own notification process, ways to look for underlying data and insights that we can see through the patterns in our own technology, and then tying that to the content. We look forward to doing more of that once our Workday Learning product is available next year. But for us, we're beginning to skate to that puck today, both using the analytics and the insights and the data that exists within Workday, mapping that and tying it to our models of how we think about empowering our talent, and then actually delivering that in real time and in context using our own technology. And I have to thank you for the work that you've been doing around the digital ecosystem and really thinking about what we call molecular content, even smaller than modules, but delivered just in time, in context for folks. And, my last comment really is just a thank you, a personal thank you to you for both challenging and curating this discussion. For many years, I don't personally believe that there's one answer for any organization. You have to be thoughtful within your context. Maybe there are organizations where ratings are relevant and appropriate, and there are other organizations where it's not, or these solutions can be used. But I just want to thank you for being a real thought leader in challenging folks that are in roles such as myself as talent leaders and curating an amazing discussion. I have gotten even more insights today through listening, and this is not the first time that I've heard you discuss these things, but I want to thank you on behalf of an industry. It's an exciting time. Organizations are going through incredible transitions. I think we're sort of getting into what I would call the third generation of human capital management, and your work has really been central to helping us think about that, challenging our thinking, and I just really appreciate events like today where you're curating an ongoing discussion to make us better. So with that, any final thoughts or comments before we close out for today?
Oh, thanks, Greg. That's very kind of you. Just, what I'll say is that, if you just trust your gut, you get a whole lot of things wrong. We thought the Earth was flat for a very long time, and, the universe revolved around the planet and all that. If you just trust your gut, there's a lot we get wrong because we've got such limited, processing power consciously. And we have so many, incredibly powerful biases that we're not able to interrupt. So I think, the science, the technologies that science is giving us the ability to find out what actually motivates people, what actually differentiates people, what actually drives people, all sorts of things we're discovering. And I think the science, while it's in its infancy, is starting to produce some great insights. And we're excited to be able to track and follow the science closely, to be able to generate fresh perspectives, and excited to see that some of that really adding value out in the field. You mentioned digital assets. I'll just show this up for one moment. The Connect, Decide, Adapt. And I've been working with you on Connect, the Neuroscience of Quality Conversations, is a very completely digital piece of work we've done to help people know the SCARF model, things like that. Decide is around bias, Adapt around growth mindset specifically. So we've been trying to iterate and experiment and use AGES and use social learning and other things to build out some interesting solutions. So that's been a direction we're going in. So just finally, just a big thank you to Workday. I really appreciate the collaboration. I know that many clients we've been working with on PM transformation have been looking closely at Workday and partnering with you guys, and that's how this began. And I appreciate the collaboration and look forward to doing more in the future.
No, well, great. Again, thank you, my friend, for sharing this incredible research and insights with the Workday community. We really appreciate it. Thanks, my friend. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks so much,
really appreciate it.